Welcome, everyone. My name is Michelle Schumann. I'm here with the Austin Chamber Music Center, and I'm so thrilled to be here with Wuhan and David Finckel. They are legends. I'm super, super excited to have them. Cellist and piano duo, but also the artistic directors, the co-artistic directors of Chamber Music Society at Lincoln Center and Music at Menlo. And you have had just such an incredible impact on chamber music across this entire nation, across the whole world. And we are just, I've wanted to present you for so long, and finally we found a time when we could do this. So we are very, very excited to have you, and thank you for chatting with us here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We know and love Austin. We have a lot of friends there. We know it has great audiences, great food, and a lot of great musicians. So we're very thrilled to come back.
It's going to be super, super fun. I wanted to talk a little bit about the program. You're doing an all-Russian program with sonatas by Mayakovsky, Rachmaninoff, and Shostakovich. And, you know, I was just thinking about it. It's so interesting because I think that Russian composers, especially of that time, had a very special relationship to the cello. Even though all these composers have written a ton of music, very prolific for many genres, somehow they kind of singled out the cello with this cello sonata. And I wanted to just hear from you why you think there was this sort of special connection and this desire to use the cello and piano duo to kind of tell these stories.
Well, in the first place, whenever there are great cellists around, composers get excited. And this has been the case not only in Russia, but so many great works for my instrument have been composed specifically for one cellist or another who was great. But this phenomenon of the great players inspiring great pieces of music also goes to other instruments. If you look at the clarinet, for example, these clarinetists like Richard Mühlfeld, who inspired Brahms to compose late in his life. I mean, we wouldn't have those pieces if it hadn't been for Mühlfeld, and we wouldn't have these cello sonatas if it hadn't been for the great Russian cello school, which really began at the end of the 19th century with Karl Davidov, probably the first and greatest Russian virtuoso. But then many of his colleagues inspired people like Rachmaninoff and played the sonata with Rachmaninoff, which was composed in 1901. You may know that this sonata of Rachmaninoff is in the dawn of his reawakening from a deep depression that resulted from failure of his first symphony's performance. And a partner piece with this is the great Second Piano Concerto. So those who know and love Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto come hear the cello sonata because it's cut of the same cloth.
And the Mayakovsky sonata, the first piece, it's definitely inspired by the great Russian composer who happened to be David's teacher, Rostropovich. And it's actually had an interesting background because when Rostropovich premiered the piece, Prokofiev was there. And Prokofiev heard this particular sonata, said, "Slava, I can write you a sonata just like this." So the Prokofiev sonata was inspired by this very first piece. Shostakovich, the story behind it is also his good friend.
Yes. He had a very good friend, a very fine cellist in the 1930s named Viktor Kubatsky. And Kubatsky hired or engaged the young Shostakovich to accompany him on a recital tour around Russia. And so I guess Shostakovich said, well, why don't I write a sonata that we can play together? This was 1934. This was the beginning of really hard times in Russia. But the amazing thing about that is that on the same program that they toured with Shostakovich's new sonata, on the second half of the program, just like our concert, was the Rachmaninoff sonata played by Kubatsky and Shostakovich. So we're mirroring moments in Russian cello piano duo history, I think in a very vivid way.
Oh yeah, and it just seems like there's such a personal connection to it as well. You know, I think about the relationships that these cellists had with these composers. And so there's that sort of symbiotic nature of them playing together, and maybe the inspiration that brought out maybe different sounds that the composers wanted to explore with those composers. And you, of course, have a very close relationship together. How do you think like having these close relationships affects the music making? And you've been playing together for so long. Tell me about your relationship of playing in life.
You go first.
It's funny. We started to play together before I actually even know how to speak English. So when David first asked me to play for his recital, I have not a faintest idea in the rehearsal what he's talking about. So we played in the beginning very much by instinct. And really within 2 months, everybody is coming backstage and say, "Are you guys married?" I said, "No, I just got to know this guy." So it's not really a given that if you have a relationship, if you play together for a long time, that you are better. Somehow in our case, start at the very beginning, it's always a chemistry there, and we treasure them. It's really, to this day, we still do our rehearsal diligently. Well, as soon as we walk into the rehearsal, nobody dare to say, "Who's the one that did the dishes last night?" Or "Can you take out the garbage, please?" We don't do that. We don't bring that into our rehearsal studio. And we also do know couples that could not stand playing together.
Right.
So in our case, we had this really interesting but exciting and intimate part of our relationship is when we make music together. And I can speak for myself that it really is one of those most amazing things that I know even before I play the first note. David already know what I want. And that's really nice. Over the years, we also, because we lived together, we grew together musically, and we will go to a concert and discuss about what we just heard. And if you say, "Wow, that recital, I think that slow movement is just too slow. It doesn't make it in the hall." The next thing, when we go into the hall, we already understand. We don't have to talk. So it's a very, very inspiring relationship for me.
We were close musically way before we were close personally. And if you think about it, I think artistic partnerships, a good artistic partnership, has possibly even more of a chance of lasting a longer time than a personal relationship like a marriage, for example. I mean, you think about artistic partnerships that have been around forever. Yo-Yo Ma and Emanuel Axe, for example, they still, are like totally in sync. And the great ensembles like, I don't know, like the Emerson Quartet, like the Beaux-Arts Trio. I mean, that these artistic partnerships had a lot of strength because I think there was a lot of good fuel in the music itself. There was so much to explore, so much to experience together, that it was a kind of a life force that was independent of a personal relationship. So anyway, I think our relationship did start there, and it continues there.
Yeah. It was a very positive thing that you couldn't communicate through words. Maybe sometimes in rehearsal we spend too much time trying to put into words what we could just discover if we keep playing and kind of figuring out things in that way. So.
He speaks English perfectly now, but sometimes we still can't communicate through words.
Time to see what Rachmaninoff can do to help with that, right? Well, it's just really exciting to have you. And then I also just want to bring this up because I'm a pianist as well. So even though these are cello piano sonatas, but these are very, very meaty piano parts, right? I always think it's interesting, David, that you brought up the second piano concerto of Rachmaninoff in sort of next door to this Rachmaninoff cello sonata, because it truly, that piano part is like a concerto. I mean, it's a massive, massive part.
Yes, I did the second concerto quite a bit as well. But I confess this one is harder than the second concerto for sure.
Yeah.
Not only, when you play a concerto, second concerto is massive, but the cello sonata has a certain sonority that you don't get in the second concerto. You also have to be very mindful your role of supporting the cello, as well as mixing into that gorgeous sound. So it took us took me a long time to feel totally comfortable with it. I still think it's one of the most difficult, gnarly piece that very few pianists tackle them.
Well, I think also it's because Rachmaninoff uses some of these pianistic textures that you see in the massive works for concerto and orchestra, and you would play them differently.
Yeah,
if you were playing them soloistically than if you do when you're playing it with the cello. And so it's just so very interesting to use basically different muscles to make something come across as grand that isn't towering, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the slow movement, especially piano's tune comes first. And then when you are playing that tune, you actually have to imagine you are a cellist. Because when the cello come in reply to you, if you play percussively, it's just never going to work. So the imitation of the string player, a string playing, and the imitation of the singing quality is incredibly important, which it does not require actually in the second piano concerto. As well as Rachmaninoff have humongous hand. The second piano concerto does not have the reach of the cello sonata. I have to say, just tons, all the left hand chords, all 10th and 11th. That in the second piano concerto, this kind of thing does not happen. So you have to really learn how to stretch your hand or fudge it or looking at particular way. But at the same time, you know, it's really, really great because most of the cello sonatas, not just the Russians, if you think of it, are all written by great pianists. Mendelssohn, Beethoven, Grieg, Chopin. I can go on and on. Shostakovich, Prokofiev, they all know piano inside out, and they all happen to have great cellist friends. So I think we're very, very, very lucky to have a cello piano duo, as well as the cello range is really in the human voice range. It's in the middle. It's the most gorgeous. It's like a great baritone if it's done right. So a pianist, our job to play cello sonata versus playing with the violins. They're very high up. You have to really take care of the bass part. With the cello, you just want to embrace it and hug it.
Well, and how do you, and also, David, how do you feel about that? Like being in that sound and coming out of that sound. I mean, it's just we'll finish with that. Tell us a little bit about that.
When you know, there's nothing as magnificent as the sound of a 9-foot, you know, great grand piano. It's like you get up close to it. It's like being almost next to an orchestra. So it's thrilling to hear it. I do sit when I play with Schumann, when I play sonatas. I don't sit in the crook of the piano with the sound coming behind my head, because I can, if I feel that I'm being overwhelmed, I force. You know, I don't want to do that. So I sit over on the other side of her, right next to her actually, where I have a little bit of my own space, but yet I'm aware of this gigantic force to my left, and as a partnering sound. But I have to say, I mean, sinking into that Rachmaninoff sonata is like taking a warm milk bath, because what's coming out of the piano is so inviting and so enveloping, that you just want to dive in.
Oh, it's going to be so great. I can't wait. And thank you so much. Thanks for chatting with me, and we'll let everyone know. And it's going to be an amazing concert. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.